So what's that cheap Edelbrock carburetor you keep seeing on eBay? Well, it's not made by Edelbrock, and I'm going to show you the reason why you shouldn't be buying that thing. So here we go. Hang tight. So lately there's been a lot of talk about this very inexpensive $230 Edelbrock knockoff carburetor that's on eBay. Well, I went ahead and got one. I'm going to show you all the things that are wrong with it. I have to apologize right now for having this hot pile of garbage on my workbench, but it was worth it to show you why you should not spend your money on a knockoff carburetor that clearly has no business going on anything. So I'm going to show you all the details about it. Leave any comments you want down below, and yeah, we'll try to break this down and show you the reason why this thing is awful. So first thing right away, before we start tearing this thing down, if you have worked with an Edelbrock carburetor, all of the newer ones have Torx bits in the air horn assembly. We don't have this on this. These are Phillips head, and I'm going to show you the hardware in it, but again, they use the absolute cheapest garbage they could find. So I'm going to go ahead and knock these out of here. But before we get started on that, I want to show you two things real quick. So a little bit different how they assemble these with pins now. They use just a regular cotter type pin, and for the accelerator pump, if it'll come out of there. Unfortunately, here's where things go kind of funny. Now I've got all the air horn assembly screws out. I want to show this to you because it's a pretty unique feature. On the choke connector rod here, typically on the Edelbrock, there is a little clip that comes out. You pop it out, and then it slides out, and you can remove it without removing the air horn. This one is notched on both ends, so the only way to get that out is you have to assemble it and disassemble it as one assembly. It is connected. You are not getting it off there. The only way to get it off there is when you have the carburetor, the top completely off, and then you get to figure out how to finagle it off there. Absolute junk. Okay, after some well-placed four-letter words, you can see what that rod is, and there is no clip to remove it. Horrible thing that they did. I'll never understand it. Here's something else before we go any further. Here's the pistons and the step-up springs. That spring does not match up to anything that I have. It is extremely light, which tells me that it will be a low vacuum spring, meaning it will collapse pretty quickly and release pretty easily, and that piston is going to bounce a lot inside of the metering jet that is down inside, and it's going to bounce from rich to lean pretty easily, I'm going to guess. That is a very, very light spring, and yeah, I'm going to describe this carburetor after we got it off the dyno to tell you exactly how we described it, but this is one of the reasons why the word I'm going to use later fits this perfectly. So another strike on the old Chinese carburetor. Junk. All right, before I take another step here, I want to point out something. This carburetor is covered in an oily type substance. I can't figure out if it's a corrosion type of substance to keep the corrosion down on it, but it's literally covering everything. It's on the hardware, it's on the inside, it's on the outside. I get it, maybe just because it came on the slow boat from China that was the reason why they did that, but it's literally an odd feeling deal. It feels like it's been sprayed down with a really thick WD-40. I don't know, just weird. Just an observation. Alright, so we got the air horn assembly out. Let's take a look at this a little closer. Now, these floats, I've had these out. They don't look too bad. They're not horrible, I guess, but they held fuel all right when we were on the dyno with it. Some of the welds look a little suspect here, or how they brazed the thing together. But the floats, they're not as bad as they look. The hardware is a little bit different colored. I'm just assuming that that's a some cheaper hardware, but oh, well, I guess I take that back. This has got maybe 30 minutes of dyno time, and look at the float. It's already separated away from it, so I don't know if that was the ethanol fuel that went through this thing or what. We ran E10 through it, but or if it's just that it's junk. So, okay, I take it back. The floats are garbage. One thing that also I noticed here is it's got an interesting little upgrade to it. That is an off-road, get both of them out of there without needle and seat. So, has a spring in it. Guess that's it. Has a spring in it and the off-road needle and seat that we saw in the carburetor on the last video. I get it. It is a bit of an upgrade, but I think I would have spent my money elsewhere instead of putting that in there. It's not a bad piece or a bad thing, but again, I just don't know how useful it is. So anyway, just kind of an odd thing about the needle and seats. Another thing here is this gasket. Now, that is just a paper type cardboard feeling gasket. And if we look here, I'll get a Edelbrock one down. That is an Edelbrock gasket, and it's got a little bit more sponginess to it or pliability to it, which I'm going to assume is what helps keep that Edelbrock carburetor sealed up. This is just literally the cheapest piece of whatever they could use to try to seal up the top of that carburetor. So we're not batting very well here. We're striking out everywhere we go. So gasket, garbage. Now let's look at the accelerator pump really quickly. It's kind of an odd, you know, I can see what they did here, but it's got a combination of some, you know, interesting components, but that spring is what concerns me. It's a little soft. So what's going to happen is when you compress down and the accelerator pump hits fuel and meets resistance and that spring collapses, you're going to run into some issues. Now, the cup, it doesn't seem too bad. It seems like it's not as wide. I'll have to compare it to another cup side by side and see, but as long as it seals up and it doesn't bleed past the bore there, I guess it's okay, but that spring is about as weak as they get, so not really digging that, and the cup's kind of suspect, so we'll give the accelerator pump probably a C if we're going to grade this on a scale like that. So the hardware to hold the choke rod on has got a regular Phillips screwdriver, and I'm going to assume here, I haven't tried this yet, but yep, it just backs right out. And Edelbrock uses a hardware that does not come out that easy. As a matter of fact, you will likely destroy the head of the little capture or the little screw that's in there before you'll get to back out of there. The threads are scored, so it's only a one-way deal. This one I could see vibrating out. It doesn't have a lock washer on, it's just a flat washer. So yeah, and that could be the reason why this was so loose too. Got just too much play in it. Again, hardware here that holds the choke rod on, same thing. I'm assuming we'll be able to pull that right out of there. We can look down in there and see that it's, and when you look at the the choke, it's the exact same thing. These will just come out of there. Yeah, there's no, it's it. There's nothing that's going to keep this together. It's not like it's got Loctite or anything on there. It can be put in and out of there as many times, and you're just going to run into issues down the road with that the longer you use it. So, yeah, junk. Now, let's take a look at, well, I just saw something here. The electric choke on the cap, oh, that's weird, doesn't have the references on here to line up with the reference mark on the body. So you can't set this lean, rich, like on the Edelbrock chokes. They have marks on there so you know where you're going to set it. And typically the Edelbrock setting is a couple of clicks lean. That way the choke plate opens up just a little bit to get some air in, but not much. But these don't have that mark on there at all. So there's no way, other than just visually looking at the choke, to to see where it's at. Let's get this cap off and see what's underneath here. It's a little loose, and I think that means I think we had it apart. Yeah, it only had two screws in it. Yeah, the spring doesn't look bad, I guess, but yeah, there is no marks on that main body. It does give you the lean and the arrow, so they copied that, but they didn't put the mark on there so you could reference it and know where you're at. So, choke's a failure. Let's see what the inside looks like. I guess it's not bad, but it's the same thing. It's got screws for everything, and the piston rod or cam here that it connects to the spring. Edelbrock puts a nice little plastic on there so it'll slide on there a bit easier. This is just metal, so I don't think that that's going to operate very good. And again, all of these are just regular screws. So, God, that's horrible. All right, let's get the squirter nozzle off and see if we can figure out what they did here. I'm almost afraid to see what they did, but for the interest of dogging this thing a little bit more, let's see. So they do not mark this with a size. That's interesting. Looks fairly normal. That looks fairly small. So I'm wondering if they are calling this a 28. I guess I could stick some wire down there and see if I can measure it. But yeah, again, poor quality gaskets, and we don't know what size that nozzle is. Lovely. Let's see if it's got a... yeah, so it does have the weight in the check ball. I'm assuming as long as that's the .141 check ball, it's fine. Feels a little big, but I'm just eyeballing it. And I guess we compare with the weight, but I guess we'll just call that a push. All right. Let's see here. We had a little bit of trouble with this to get the idle set right. And I have a feeling... oh, good grief. Yeah, that's not good. I may see the reason why we couldn't get this to idle very well. Yeah, there is literally, it's either broken off, doesn't have any rough edges, it's either broken itself off or they just said screw it and put it together like that. Let's see if there's anything on the bottom side where we can... yeah, it did break off. It's still stuck in there. Good grief. Well, that's lovely. Those don't happen very often with the Edelbrock carburetor, but I have seen people break the tips off. But you really got to crank that thing down in there to get that to happen. But yeah, lovely. No wonder it wouldn't idle. One little thing I noticed on the metering rods, I like how they have the number kind of laser etched on there. Sometimes Edelbrock ones are harder to read. I can read that one pretty clear, so I do like how they have those marked. We'll see if it's the same size in a minute, but I do have how they have that etched on there. Very easy to read. Now let's get these boosters out again. I'm not a fan of this hardware that they are using. It is very, very cheap, and Phillips head screws don't do a very good job in these. Yeah, not a fan. One thing I did notice is the straight leg boosters are cocked. They're not in there straight, and show you on a close-up and see if we can get a better look at it. But they are certainly kind of, the one on the passenger side certainly is, and the one on the secondaries are kind of spread out a little bit more than a standard Edelbrock one is. So I don't know if that's, well, nothing's normal about this carburetor, but I don't know if it's a manufacturing defect or just something they overlooked and they just shoved them in there wherever. So, weird. So, yeah, they're kind of weird how they're in there. Same crappy gaskets. Like I say, these have had fuel run through it. And, yeah, these are already getting sticky. So I don't think that they're going to last very long. But, yeah, just really, really poorly made. It's hard to tell, but the air bleed reference there looks like it's smaller. We'll have to kind of compare that and see if it's any different. But yeah, right now I'm not liking these boosters very well. Primary ones are ugly. Alright, let's get the back ones out and see if we find any surprises other than the way the fuel enters the system. Hopefully we won't find anything else back here, but so far with this carburetor, it's nothing surprises me, so we shall see what happens. Same thing, crappy gaskets, and yeah, that's cocked in there for sure. I don't like the way that looks. Same crappy hardware, and air bleed reference kind of is a little, yeah, don't know. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about those. So let me show you something here that I just noticed. Same thing, crappy. Finish isn't that good on it either. It's shiny, but I don't know that that's what I want. Anyway, wait till you see the weighted air valve. Looks like a normal weighted air valve, right? No, they screw in instead of these being rolled over and pressed on. And the valves are screwed in as well. So I'm just going to guess here. Yeah, they're not scored. So these are just going to come right apart, and they really shouldn't, because if one of these screws happens to loosen itself up, what happens with it? Where do you think it's going? Yep, hello Mr. Valve, hello Mr. Piston. That is absolutely atrocious. Yeah, now these wouldn't make that big of a deal. They're not in the path of the air, but yeah. Shouldn't do that. Good grief. Let's see if we well, the baffles don't look too bad, I guess, as long as they do their job. So let's get the jets out of there. That's the last thing we're going to take a look at. This pile and see what those look like. One thing about these jets is, one, we need to determine if that's the actual size on it. I'm going to put a set of calipers on the rods here in just a quick second, but I see something I like. That has a 401 stamped in it. I don't know if you can read that, but it's pretty well pronounced. Yeah, same on this side too, and I do like that. Again, my eyes are getting old, and you younger folks can probably see those okay. But I do like that. It's very, very well defined. It says 401. Let's see if we can take a look at the, yeah, 398. I can read that from all the way up here, 398. So, yeah, they look about the same. I've got a tool that will measure that orifice, but do not have it here, so we'll confirm that later, I guess. But yeah, they don't look too bad. Let's take a look at the bottom side. Yep, more screws that are not one way. And again, the problem is, if any of these come loose, where do you think they are headed? Yeah, good grief. I mean, they're stiff, but that's not a one-way screw that's in there. Not coming out that easy. Yeah. Looks like they put a little bit of something on there, some sort of Loctite or thread sealer or thread lock. Kind of hard to tell. Looks like it. So maybe they got smart and put it on the bottom side. They just didn't do anywhere else. One thing I did notice when we put this on the dyno is some of these plugs. The accelerator pump, you can kind of tell we had to bash that in there because it wasn't seated all the way, and we were afraid fuel was going to start leaking out of there. Some of these are pretty much the same. Like this one's not seated all the way in there. Now that's a, yeah, that one's not seated. That one's not seated. That one's seated. That one's mostly seated. But yeah, any of these that come in contact with fuel, it's just not a good thing. These look seated. Here's something that's kind of insulting to the Edelbrock folks. 1406-6 is the part number on this. Every single carburetor has the same designation. They don't put a date code on there. I can understand that. Why would they? Why would they care? Yeah. Yeah. Same thing on the sides here. Hardware. Oh, that's cute. I didn't see that. Oh, I guess it is rolled over on there. But yeah, I certainly don't like that hardware. The Edelbrock carburetors aren't that way. Alright, so let's take a look at these metering rods. Those we can take care of here today. So 75.47. So that means we're at 75 thousandths and 47 thousandths. Let's see how close that is. So 75 is going to be on the big end. Man, it's dialed in perfectly. 75 thousandths. Perfect. Let's see if we're on the 45 here. Little fat at... Oh, we were 47. That's what it was. So it's perfect. The rods are absolutely perfect. You're supposed to be 75.47. And that's exactly what they were. So metering rods, well, they get an A+. Good job. Now, I promise you that I'll tell you what word we used to describe this when we put this on the dyno. Fairly, a little more aggressive than probably should be. Small block Chevy, I don't remember the cam specs, but it is a fairly aggressive little engine. But a 600 CFM carburetor should run on there just fine. Won't RPM very well. It's okay. We just wanted to see how it was going to run idle and how it went through probably halfway, 3,500, 4,500, somewhere in there. It should operate just fine. Erratic was the word that was used to describe how the AFR bounced around. When we talked about the step-up springs and the pistons here, how light that spring was, it's because that was bouncing around, especially at that 2,000, 2,500, somewhere in there RPM. It's just not going to be able to give you the correct control over the fuel system. So, yeah, I think that pretty much describes this carburetor other than hot garbage, trash. Please don't waste your money on it. An insult to Edelbrock and Carter. Yeah, if you look at eBay, the suspect thing about the whole thing is there is 20 different sellers with this carburetor on there, and I'm not going to give any of the names on it, but every name is different. And they have the same location in Kentucky that this thing supposedly ships out of. It doesn't. It ships out of Los Angeles. That's where this one came from, even though the seller showed to be in Walton, Kentucky. They're just trying to flood the market with this crap, make some money, whatever the case may be. Do yourself a favor. It's $230, $240, $270 was the most expensive one I saw. Do yourself a favor. Don't support this garbage. Don't buy this thing. just ignore it. Buy yourself an Edelbrock. If you need to buy a used one, there's plenty of good used ones on the market. You can rebuild it. There's rebuild services out there like Riley's Rebuilds is a good source to go to get your carburetors rebuilt. We do it here, obviously, but don't do that to yourself, and don't do that to Edelbrock. It's just not worth it. So I don't even know how to give this a grade. I gave something a C earlier, but it's a fail. Every piece of this where you would expect it to be something that you need, it's just not there. None of it. The hardware, the needle and seats, the step-up springs and pistons, the floats, boosters, you name it. The whole carburetor is just a poorly made hunk of crap. It's the only way to put it. So, yeah, just skip it if you see it, guys. It's just not worth it. If you have any questions about this, leave them down below. I'll try to answer them without being insulting. But this thing needs to be insulted, so you're not going to hurt my feelings if you're going to be insulting. I need to wash my hands, get some hand sanitizer after touching this piece of crap. Again, it's got that little coating all over everything. It's horrible. So anyway, I apologize for this one. Next week's video, I promise you, is going to knock your socks off. Stay away from this one, guys. I guess that's pretty much all we have to say about it. So, and again, I guess we'll see you guys on the next one. Sorry about that.